Good evening, good evening, good evening. This one is called The Biggest and the Toughest, the story of David's big faith. The Philistine army stood facing King Saul. They acted as though they weren't frightened at all, but King Saul's mighty army was shaking with fear, falling over each other to get to the rear. Turn the page. There, standing in front of the Philistine camp, was a giant, the Philistines' fierce fighting champ. His name was Goliath, and man was he scary. His muscles were huge, his body was hairy. He stood 9 feet tall, about as tall as a tree, the biggest man anyone ever did see. The men in Saul's army, and even King Saul, thought he was the biggest and toughest of them all. The giant cried, "Send me a soldier to fight. I'll smash 'em all day and I'll stomp 'em all night. When all of the smashing and stomping is through, your land will be ours, and we'll make slaves out of you." For 40 long days he repeated the call, but no one would fight with him, no one at all. Nearby, David, a shepherd boy, shepherded sheep, keeping beasties away so his sheep he could keep. Though 3 of his brothers had gone with King Saul, young David stayed home because he was too small. His father gave David another big chore: take food to your brothers out fighting the war. Whatever his father would say, he'd obey, so he packed up a donkey and went on his way. When David arrived at the camp, he heard shouting, mean insults and teases Goliath was spouting. "Just when will you chickens send someone to fight? I'll smash 'em all day and I'll stomp 'em all night. When all of the smashing and stomping is through, your land will be ours, we'll make slaves out of you." Again, the king's soldiers went running in fear, falling over each other to get to the rear. David called to the soldiers, "Hey, who is that dude? His insults are mean, his teasing is rude." "Goliath!" they shouted while running away. "He's big and he's tough. You'd be silly to stay." But David decided to talk to King Saul to tell him that he was not frightened at all. The king said, "Goliath is big and he's tough. You're a boy with a sling. That's not nearly enough." Young David said, "I fought a lion and bear. Both were bigger than I, so the fights were not fair. With God as my strength, both the beasts took a beating. With God as my strength, I will not be retreating." The king said to David, "The Lord be with you. Take my sword and my shield, put my helmet on too." But the armor was big and the sword weighed a lot. They fit on a king, but on David did not. So off came the armor and all the king's stuff. With God as my strength, just my sling is enough. He gathered some stones from the bed of a stream, and as he did, he could hear the big Philistine scream, "I called for a soldier, you sent out a squirt. Send him back to his mummy, he's gonna get hurt. The boy is too puny to put up a fight. I'll smash him all day and I'll stomp him all night. And when all of the smashing and stomping is through, your land will be ours, we'll make slaves out of you." Then David said, "You have your spear and your sword, but I will fight you in the name of the Lord." David loaded his sling and he spun it around. The stone hit the giant, then he hit the ground. Boom! Now the Philistine army went running in fear, falling over each other to get to the rear. Young David said, "God made the Philistine fall because God is the biggest and toughest of all." The end. You know what? That's the end. That is the end.